let's start with the aftermath of the strike, which that's just an article we're going to read. And then we're going to look at live footage from the strike. And then we're going to look at what other drivers are saying about the strike. And if you missed what I said about the strike, I acknowledged that the money I made on Wednesday was higher because people were striking. I'm not saying that to make fun of them. I am acknowledging that, one, I'm thankful for all the money I'm able to make. It doesn't sit right with me not to acknowledge the fact that some of the income I made last week was off of the backs of other people who are fighting for things that might benefit. It's not above me to acknowledge that. And I want to make sure I do acknowledge that. For those of you who don't know me very well, my long-term gain isn't about Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft to me is a stepping stone. It is important to talk about before we start talking about the strike. Someone left a comment and they said that I felt disingenuous. It struck a nerve because I never tried to use the strike as like a way to increase my views or subscribers. I would get more views and more subscribers if I was full on support of the strike. And I do support the strike. I'm just not striking because what I have going on personally, financially, is more important than everything else that's going on. What I do for my household, paying off my debt, is more important for me. I don't plan on being a rideshare driver for 2 years. One, this is not a long-term thing for me. I've been here longer than I've already wanted to. And most people who become Uber and Lyft drivers, it's something that we fall into, but then we realize how cool it really is and we stay in it. So part of me will always be part of the rideshare community. Even if I go out and start buying house rentals, my foundation at my core, the thing that put me in the position to step up into a life where I'm able to do that, is the freedom that rideshare gave me. If I'm ever a successful YouTuber, once I'm debt free, I plan on starting different YouTube channels. If that's ever successful, the core of why I was successful was the freedom and the ability to make as much money as possible to pay off my debt, which lowers my income, which gives me the time to make the videos that I want to make. I will always have to acknowledge that rideshare is going to be part of whatever future success that I have. I'm acknowledging that, but I do not think it is wise to make rideshare a long-term play. You can technically retire with rideshare, but keep in mind, right? Uber and Lyft have both put out press releases that have said they want to replace us with self-driving cars. You can disagree with whether they will be able to accomplish it. That's not the discussion we're having. This is similar to your parents saying to your face that they do not want you in their house. That is the equivalence. They do not want you in your house, even though they're feeding you, they're doing the parent thing, but you still will feel less love. You wouldn't make a plan to stay in your parents' house as long as possible when they're making it clear they don't want you here. If you turn 18 and you haven't started figuring out a way to leave, you're setting yourself up for failure in that scenario. It's just like Uber and Lyft. Even if they fail to replace us with self-driving cars, they've said that they want to replace us with self-driving cars. Why would you want to hang the future of your finances on companies who have said that? That's where I'm at. So that's one. And then two, we can strike, we can be successful. But under that, one, government moves very slow. If we get some changes enacted via government, it's going to take a while. Even the changes that happened in New York City, that started happening like 2-3 years ago. That's the result of court cases that's been going on for 2 to 3 years. Are you going to be here in 2 to 3 years? I don't want you to be here in 2 to 3 years, right? At least, at minimum, I don't want you to have to be here. If you want to be a rideshare driver for as long as possible, fine. But if you're going to be a rideshare driver and not have an exit strategy that you've been working on and saving for, when we're not making enough anymore, that you can say, all right, I'm done with this. That's at minimum where I would like for you guys to be. At minimum, have your exit strategy planned and put yourself in a position to execute it when things get really shitty. And then two, just because a change is made doesn't mean the change will happen in the way you think it will. We've seen that in Seattle. They've set a floor minimum wage. And now it's been about 2-3 months since they've done that. Now we have people who are drivers speaking up about how, yes, they're making more money per active time, right? They're making more money per hour of active time, but the overall money they're making has decreased because of more saturation, because of the new law, and because less people are ordering food because of the fee increases, right? You increase minimum pay, it has to be paid from somewhere. Even if they do shady things to increase the average cost of meals, it's going to play a role into the supply and demand. So just because we have these laws that get executed doesn't mean it's going to look like the way we thought it would. And I'm not saying that means we shouldn't do anything. I think progress is important, but it does mean we need to put ourselves in a position to when we are trying to progress and that progression doesn't come out the way we thought it would. Right? I think that's pretty reasonable. And that's what I push here, right? I think the individual's finances is more important than the collective. And I am here to encourage you guys to pay down your debt, pay off your car loans, stop getting car loans, stop rolling over negative equity from your last car to your new car. I want you guys to be in a position to, one, escape, and then two, to use rideshare as a stepping stone into that thing that you always wanted to do. You want to become a pilot? It's expensive. It's like $10,000 to get your private license. You can do it if you pay off your bills, if you're lowering your expenses. That stuff can happen. And I don't think sacrificing every big day, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, Super Bowl, to make a point to companies who we shouldn't be working for long term is the best use of your individual time. I do think striking has benefits. right? We've seen it. Just those benefits take so long, and those benefits don't always benefit everyone in the way they think it will. Important for me to say before we look through the aftermath of the V-Day strike. So this is from Vox. The title of the story is Why Lyft and Uber drivers Did Their Largest Strike Ever. This came out February 14th, which was Valentine's Day, and it came out 7:10. So I guess after they thought it was over. It says the protest spotlights gig workers' lack of basic labor protections. On Wednesday, Lyft, Uber, and DoorDash drivers mounted one of their largest strikes ever as part of a push for fair pay and better protections. The strikes, which took place in as many as 44 cities across the country, lasted at least 2 hours and featured drivers refusing to give riders while gathering at airports in cities including Chicago, Newark, Philadelphia. Drivers are protesting the wages they're being paid, a lack of transparency around how pay is calculated, and concerns about abrupt account deactivations by the app. Now, I do have to say there are kind of like two rideshare entities that kind of spearheaded the strike movement. There was like one that's kind of like trying to be a union type thing. We can't really have unions as independent contractors, and they did their thing at the airport for 2 hours. So that strike is good for generating press, fine. But airport drivers at the airport doing airport stuff is not going to move the needle in the way that I think the other half did it. So the other half is kind of like spearheaded by like the Rideshare Professor, the Mic Drop podcast, and some of those other YouTubers where it's not a 2-hour strike. It's a strike all day. What we're going to do is we're going to turn our apps on and we're going to keep declining rides so that like other drivers aren't benefiting and whatever. Like that I think has more of an effect than what this half did. But regardless, press was gained because of it. The protests underscore how few protections gig workers who have been classified as independent contractors under state and federal laws have compared to employees. While companies are required to abide by minimum wage laws and provide healthcare benefits for employees, gig workers lack the same safety net and must rely on corporations voluntarily improving their working conditions. Pay has gotten significantly lower in recent years, an Uber driver who planned a rally at Reagan Airport said outside Washington, D.C. That's why people are super angry right now. The strikes were largely organized by Rideshare Drivers United and Justice for App Workers, two labor organizations that focus on advocacy for app-based independent contracts. I think this is a little unfair. I think the Rideshare Professor was calling for the strike before them, and I feel like in some of these articles, he's not getting the press he deserves, but it's about half and half. He's in a couple articles, and then we have this. The groups chose Valentine's Day for the protest because the level of business the apps tend to see on the holiday and of the symbolism it has for drivers' inability to spend time with people they care about. Too many Uber and Lyft drivers are unable to spend time with their own children and loved ones as they work extreme hours in mobile sweatshop conditions with virtually zero protections on the job. I don't think it's all that. Mobile sweatshop conditions, that's a little like over the top. I don't like that hyperbole, but I will say this. I will say that while a one-day strike is great press, right? I think something that would be cool is like maybe we pick the slowest day of the week, probably Tuesday, and all drivers kind of like agree not to protest. And I think that has like a better long-term impact, right? One, we're not missing out on as much money, but two, people still have to get to school, people still have to get to work. And I think when drivers start impacting that on a regular basis, it will have a more long-term effect. Now, some drivers aren't on the internet, right? Some drivers don't know about the strikes. Like I've heard stories from drivers talking to other drivers who like, wait, the strikes today? It's happening right now? Like not everyone's aware. We're a very small minority on the internet. So what would be cool is if we had a long-term striking mythology, eventually it would spread. Pretty much be a word of mouth. Wednesday would happen and the passenger would be like, man, it's really hard to get rides on Tuesdays. You know what's up with that? Yeah, we're striking. Like even when I was driving on Valentine's Day, some of the passengers were like talking about it. So if we were to do this over a long period of time, every Tuesday, strike Tuesday, protest Tuesday, whatever it is, I think that I'm not going to say it's better or worse than striking on just the busy days, but it's something that I'd be more willing to commit to. I take every Tuesday off, sure. And then on those Tuesdays, I'm going to be preaching to you guys that, start chasing those dreams, right? If you're trying to become a doctor, go buy a doctor book. And on Tuesdays, that's what you're doing. You're reading about that. For me, Tuesdays would be editing videos. So I think that I might make a video asking the Rideshare Professor how he feels about it and breaking down why I think it would be a great idea. I don't know. We'll see. That's a time commitment, but I think that would be cool in the grand scope of things. Hey, everybody, Tuesdays, we protest. Let's keep going with the story. Story says, too many Uber and Lyft drivers are unable to spend time with their own children and loved ones as they work extreme hours in mobile sweatshop conditions with virtually zero protections of the job. In response to the strikes, Lyft and Uber have cited median and average pay figures above minimum wage for drivers, as well as tools they've launched to make it easier for workers to report safety concerns and deactivations. I don't know how I didn't realize this before, but I believe that Lyft put out that 70% split thing to get ahead of the strike, and not necessarily to downplay it. There's some downplaying happen, but to assign blame. Like Lyft is saying that majority of these fees are going towards insurance, and whether you disagree or agree with that, I don't care. If you disagree, show me proof so I can have a better argument. But I think that Lyft wants drivers to realize that if insurance wasn't as expensive, then they could get more money, in hopes that drivers start protesting towards that idea. I think that's what the reason was for it. And let's see, I think this article is probably going to touch on that. So it says, according to Lyft, its median driver made $23.46 per hour after expenses as of the second half of 2023 while on a trip, while Uber said its average driver made $33 per hour as of the fourth quarter of 2023 while on a trip before expenses. This is misleading. They're talking about active time. They're saying whenever a driver is on the way to a passenger and or a passenger is in their car, that they are making $23 an hour with Lyft and $33 per hour with Uber. But that is misleading, because we need to measure our time from the moment we go online, we start driving, to the moment we stop driving. How much money are we making? And they are trying to shift the goalposts to be about how much money we make online to how much money we make when people are in our car. No, duh, we're gonna make money when people are in our car. I would hope we're making money while people are in our car. But if there's not enough business to make money like while you're online, then the active time doesn't matter. If you only have 4 hours of active time per week, but you were online for 40 hours, you cannot pay your bills, despite even if you made $100 per hour. Like, it's not a great metric for measuring overall profitability. Now, it is a great metric for other things. It's just not a great metric for this talking point that they're trying to do. And someone asked me, why am I so like bothered by it? Because I've already noticed that the way drivers are talking to each other are in active time. Active time looks better on paper, but it's not the correct story. You can see that, I really get wound up about that active time stuff. Lyft also shared that it will soon release earnings summaries for each ride that allow drivers to see where the fare money goes. Both companies said that they had not witnessed major disruptions to their service during the strikes. So there's probably no major disruptions, but they probably had to pay out more in bonuses. And then I will also say that I don't have access to the fare breakdown yet. Can't wait until I have it, because I really want. I'm gonna break it down every week. It's gonna be more content, which is great as a YouTuber. Numbers are important. Using numbers to correlate what's happening in your business are extremely important. So I'm really excited to have that information, so I can have more accurate information to regurgitate to you guys. So 2023 report from the UCLA Labor Center, however, found that companies are pocketing a greater share of customers' fare in recent years. In a study that analyzed data from 2019, 2020, and 2022, New York City Uber and Lyft rides, researchers found passengers' fares for both companies increased at a faster rate than driver pay for those same rides. And that makes sense. So let me finish this paragraph and I'll kind of dive a little more into that. The study also found the amount of companies take from each ride is highly variable, and that they're now taking a larger percentage than they once were. Okay, I had a realization. I put out a video yesterday, a boring video about me going through Lyft's methodology for how they decided on the 70% split. Like, what math did they use? What studies did they use to come up with it? It's valuable information, boring as shit to read. Just being completely honest with you, but I put it out there because even if it's boring, you guys should have access to that information. What I will say is, one, insurance across the board is increasing, right? My insurance went from $300 for 2 cars plus rideshare endorsement, right? My wife's car, my car. So on average, her car is $100, my car was $100, the rideshare endorsement was an extra $100. So my car was kind of $200. It went from that $300 to $500, which is like about a 50% increase per month. About $500 per month. And it's not, we got into no accidents, no tickets, no nothing. It's just everyone else. So because everyone else sucks and they're getting to accidents and doing whatever, getting tickets, people who have done nothing have to pay more money. That's kind of the game in how insurance works. Insurance is like betting. These companies are betting that they're able to collect more money than they have to pay out. That's just how it works. And it's okay. And I'm not overall upset at that. But even with Lyft and Uber, this is true. In that white paper that I referenced, Lyft said that 90% of the drivers are driving like 10 hours per week. That's nothing. It was really, I was so shocked by that. I still don't believe it. Even though I just said that to you, I don't believe it. I think what's happening is, the problem is these full-time drivers, us, we are paying for the insurance of these smaller drivers, right? There's no breakdown of how insurance is broken down, and we need that information, right? I think I've contemplated drumming up a petition that forces or calls out Uber and Lyft for, not really breaking down that insurance amount. But I don't see why they don't, because if it is true that insurance is the highest expense, and if we as investors, people who are invested in the stock, Uber and Lyft as the company themselves, and drivers all tackle the insurance costs for these companies, it would benefit everyone I just listed, including the riders. So if what they're saying is true, they need to give us more information to validate that truth. I would rather buy my own commercial insurance, because I have a video, I'll put it out soon, where I looked at how much it costs for commercial insurance. It was like, for me in my market, which is really high right now, it was like $500 to $600 $600 extra on insurance per month. But if you look at the fees compared to how much I drive, I would make more money paying for my own insurance and not having Uber and Lyft taking a cut for insurance, right? Even if they were to increase their cut after external fees, it would still be more profitable. However, that would only be profitable to full-time drivers because insurance companies would charge all drivers about $600. It's going to differ depending on your market. Let's just call it $600 at the high end. If you charge someone who's part-time $600 a month for insurance and they're only driving $200 to $300 a week, that's not worth it for them. But a lot of the part-time drivers might be driving Friday, Saturday, which are the busy nights. So it might not be in Lyft and Uber's full interest to do that, which is why I don't think they're being completely transparent about it. I think that's a good thing to target. If I start a petition to see how many people are interested in doing that, and probably try to, how involved do I want to get into this? I don't know how involved I want to get. That's kind of a big part of it for me too. But yeah, we'll keep moving. We'll keep going. We gotta speed through this. In a similar vein, a 2024 Business Insider analyst concluded that Lyft's and Uber's sense of drivers' hourly earnings can differ greatly from that of drivers because of how they make that calculation. I bet you're gonna start talking about active time. Both companies typically only factor in active time driving passengers when totaling earnings, not time spent waiting on the app for rides, which many drivers also count as working, which all drivers, this is Tristan talking, not the article, all drivers should count towards working. It's not just pay that's a concern. However, riders are also striking in the hope of putting pressure on companies and lawmakers to improve safety protections and to provide more stability regarding access to the app. Gig workers are more vulnerable than other workers because they are not legally considered employees, and therefore they do not have all of the rights and protections that regular workers get, including the right to minimum wage and overtime. This means that their employees have no legal obligation to pay them any wage rate, let alone the minimum wage. They are also not protected against workplace discrimination and unsafe working conditions. Generally speaking, if you're making less than minimum wage during normal periods, like not slow periods, this job is probably not for you. Just because we are making more than minimum wage doesn't mean it's the correct amount we should be getting paid, because we do have expenses and things like that. So I don't want you to conflate those two things. Practically, this has meant that there's no pay standard for independent contractors who work for companies like Lyft and Uber beyond those that the app companies voluntarily set. The companies are also under no obligation to help in the case of injury. There's limited recourse for workers if their accounts are deactivated. They're working on that. Let's check out what it looked like when drivers actually went on strike in front of Uber's main office in California. So this is from the Rideshare guy. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him.
With a 75/25 and the original mileage and time with base fare, go back to that. That's what we want.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing your.
This is one way to do it.
So essentially what he's saying is, so drivers actually used to be a finite split between Uber and Lyft drivers. I think it was like 80% for drivers, 20% for Uber. That's when they were back starting out trying to get people on the platform. I do think they need to go back to that promised split, and we can see Lyft inching towards it, but it's still not what it needs to be.
What do you think is an ideal solution for drivers? What would be ideal for you as far as pay and
The ideal for me would be for them to go back to the original agreement.
The original rate card, right?
Started.
Yeah.
Go back with that 75/25 and the original mileage and time with base fare. Go back to that.
So I can show you what he's talking about. Charleston rate card. This is an old rate card. The one that's going to show you isn't like accurate. I guess I should put Lyft, huh? And he's saying upfront pay came out like what, a year or two ago. I remember I was there for that switch. Our rides used to be like this. This is the base fare. Here's how much we get per mile. This is old. So this is not what I was earning when it switched. I was earning about 70 cents per mile in my town. You see the cost per minute, going back to what I said way earlier, where we make a lot more money per mile than we do per time, which is why if you're sitting in traffic, it's not a great time. Don't sit in traffic. Then you have your maximum fare, your minimum fare, scheduled ride cancellation penalty, scheduled ride minimum fare. That's not a thing here at all. So you got your service fees, and it shows you, right? It shows you the service fee. It's flat. It's a rate card. It's flat. It shows you the South Carolina local assessment fee. All right, now we know this is what government's charging. So we got fares that varies. There's no tolls where I live, so I see what that varies. Airport fees, that's something that's set by the government. So it looks like we had this information and they robbed it from us. And then when they brought it back, they made it variable. So like that's why I think that drivers who are driving more often are paying for the insurance of the drivers who aren't driving often because of that variableness. There's a lot of people here, right? And just remember, potentially everybody in a green shirt, probably a driver, right? And just seeing 10 drivers in one place, to me, that's a lot of people. And this looks like a good chunk of people.
Amazing. Sergio. And any observations, Sergio, of today?
I think this is all necessary. This is part of the process, right? And it's ironic, by the way, out of all days today, Uber announces a $7 billion with a B share buyback and their stock goes up by over 15% out of all days of the protest and the strikes, right?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Uber traditionally has not been profitable, but don't let that fool you. Companies can choose not to be profitable. Companies can choose to take the money that they've made and invest it into something else, right? With the softening of the economy, a lot of investors started pulling back their money. And so Uber didn't have free money to play with anymore. They actually had to show that they're profitable in order to keep their stock from increasing. That's why we saw all those layoffs. That's why we're seeing all these changes that are affecting driver pay. So for the last 2 quarters, they've been profitable. So their stock is skyrocketing. And now that they are profitable, they're doing some buybacks. So what does that mean for drivers? Not much. It kind of showcases where Uber's headspace is, where they're focused more on their stock than they are on the drivers. Some of the changes they're making are impacting pay, but we're seeing on paper with their income for their companies increasing. So like, it doesn't mean too much for us like directly, but you're seeing where the siphoning is happening.
Yeah.
So where did that $7 billion come from? Where did it come from? It came from all these people's pockets. And to me,
Tesla's out
look,
there.
fairness is fair. We got to play fair, and obviously they don't have a history of playing fair, but
So if you're not following this channel, go ahead and follow it. And we don't always stand on the same principles, but it's very important that people have different perspectives. So make sure you're following a bunch of different rides here. I like to think how I think is the best way to think, but it's not always the best way to think. And you should be cross-referencing with other channels as well. This is a place where normal people come to say things. And then this is the subreddit Uber drivers. So this is where Uber drivers come to say things, right? And it's kind of ranked based off of like comments and how many people upvoted, like how interesting it is. You can see here, strike going strong in New Jersey, and they show their screenshot. There's a couple others. There's a couple here for Lyft as well. So I think every now and then, maybe once a week, drivers really should check in on Uber Reddit and Lyft Reddit to kind of get their heart on the pulse of what's happening if you care. So this is LA on a Wednesday. And, people are saying usually at this time on a Wednesday, it's not bonusing this way. So they're kind of using that as a metric. And I think it's fair to say that the strike is effective, especially with press at minimum. Even if they failed to stop drivers from driving, the amount of press that we've got as a result for it is pretty darn cool. So I will give them props for that. I was going to go through a couple of them, but it's 5:46. I'm running out of time, and I am going to buy a Tesla. Not for real, because I don't think it's a great idea. I just want to prove to you with math, logic, and reasoning why rideshare drivers should stop buying brand new Teslas. And I'm going to walk you through it right now.